All right, so we are live. Hello, Elliott. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Elliott?
Oh, sorry, my mic was muted. Okay, yes, I
No
can.
worries. Yeah.
Uh,
Okay. So
so,
yeah, Luke Ford. I was arguing that I think my appearances on Luke Ford have not really been interesting. I've kind of dragged on the conversation too much. And you were going to perhaps offer a counterpoint or maybe build on that. So go ahead.
well, okay, okay, just from my conversation with Luke, I think he does. Anytime he shows up, when you show up in the chat, and if he calls out to you, that means that he enjoyed the conversation. So, if he were truly bored, he would probably not call out to you. So, I
But I
think you're.
think he's just being polite because I'm a woman, and I think he thinks that a
No, no, no,
woman
no,
is
because you
interesting
have
company.
no. No, trust me. I mean, he has a lot of boring guests, and he just doesn't call out to them, right? So, um, but you should come in. You should do like a little bit of preparation, just
Yeah.
so that you know you really state clearly, both for Luke's sake and for the audience's sake, is that you're here to introduce a new idea, right? And just
Mm.
clearly articulate the new idea that you're introducing, and then support it. But um,
Yeah, because I've done that in Luke Ford spaces. So we've sort of entertained the idea of talking about analogy in the Quran and the Torah and just different religions, like just exploring the concept of analogy in religions and also rhetoric. But we just didn't get around to doing that. Like we kind of did it, but I was not prepared. I didn't have like the Quranic verses or the biblical verses. I didn't have anything. And I'm just so yeah, therefore it was just rubbish. And then I said to him, well, we will eventually do this, and we never got round to doing it. But it's
well,
still
yeah,
kind of in my
come.
brain.
Well, yeah, but have a few concrete examples like written out, and so you could, you know, discuss something very pointed and concrete, like this verse means this compared to that verse, and really ground the conversation in a specific example.
What has been your favorite appearance on Luke Ford of your own sort of your own appearances?
Oh, I don't know. Uh, I did one where I was sort of making fun of Colin Liddell.
Right. So
Well,
why did you?
I got in a small tiff with Colin Liddell over Twitter, and then I
Right.
sort of
Was that
recounted.
recent?
It was about a year ago, a little
Okay.
over a year ago,
Mm.
and I sort of recount. So Colin's one of Luke's favorite guests. So Colin, you notice that Luke lights up when Colin's in the chat. Like he'll always like to have come on, and Colin was a frequent guest on Luke's show, like almost on a daily basis in the old days with KMG.
Mm.
Um, so I don't know if you ever heard it, but Colin got in a furious argument with KMG. Did you ever hear that? I gotta find that stream for you. But it was
I don't know who
absolute.
KMG is.
Oh, Kevin Michael Grace.
Oh, right, right. Okay, yeah. Okay, I get it. Yeah,
So,
I'm
did you
following.
ever listen during that period?
I did, but I can't really remember what exactly I was listening to. But I do. It was just very random. Some like old man speaking to
Yeah,
Luke Ford.
yeah.
I was
He's a bit
yeah.
of
I
a
was just watching.
curmudgeon.
Yeah, I was just watching a sort of yeah. I was watching an old curmudgeon sort of white nationalist talking to a convert to Judaism, and he used to be a porn journalist. That's how I was reading it
Yeah,
back
they
then.
they had very strong personalities, and they didn't necessarily gel or complement one each other. So they eventually grew apart.
Right.
And I was on like a little off-label stream we were talking about Luke's show, and I had mentioned that Luke seemed very uncomfortable because
Oh, okay.
in this, Luke claims that he overheard this stream, and I was the impetus for them breaking up.
Oh, okay,
I mean,
fascinating.
yeah, I mean, this show was there was like 100 plus people listening to that, at its peak. It was a pretty big show for an internet term, right?
Mm,
So I felt like I had like a small hand in something kind of tragic. Um, but the truth is Kevin would kind of he could be a bit of a windbag sometimes, and he would only sort of he really liked discussing headlines and politics,
mm,
and like hour upon hour, and that I can only take about an hour of that stuff before I really just kind of numb out and stop caring. But Kevin could really grind on with it, and
So what sort of
Luke wanted
topics
his.
did Kevin like to speak about, though? Do you think that topically they were at odds, or just almost like
Oh, it just a
in
matter of
terms of methodology?
emphasis. So
Yeah.
Luke likes politics, but he likes to really interweave the psychological
Mm,
aspect to
yeah.
politics. He tries to contextualize politics in terms of individual psychology, right?
Right.
Whereas KMG likes to sort of discuss politics as they unfold and just analyze them at face value,
Mm,
right? And in terms of just sort of knowable, obvious political motives, right? So, um, which is, it has its place, but after a while, it just starts to seem like just a,
mm,
current event show. And that's not where Luke, that's not where he naturally lives.
mm,
So, there has to be an aspect of the psychological, I think, for Luke to be engaged, or it has to involve something that's just an uncomfortable truth. I don't know if you heard that stream of when I talked to him, but Luke is very comfortable with uncomfortable topics. He likes to go into places that are a bit where that people like to sweep under the rug a bit. Topics like betrayal and things like that, things that are just intrinsically painful. And I think he puts off a number of people by doing that because he, you know, when you sort of force people to think about uncomfortable things, they tend to drop away because
right.
they'd
So
rather
did
not deal
Kevin
with.
Michael Grace not like that?
No, he did not like that at all.
Oh, he's
And,
quite the prude then.
yeah, he's a prude. He's Catholic. He's like a practicing Catholic.
Well, there are so many Catholics who are not prudes, by the way. They will talk about sex non-stop. But he's like very old school then, very sort of
Yeah,
respectable, America, old
he is a
values.
boomer. He
Yeah.
confessed to being a boomer. So,
I like
uh,
that. I respect that about him. But I never really got into him. Like, I just found the duo, yeah, they were kind of at odds with one another. But then I would need to revisit those streams and um, actually listen to what was being said because I don't think I was that involved with Luke's stream back then.
yeah, yeah. No, it was. There's a lot of people that it was a daily event. It was. And the thing about Luke's stream is it works well for me because it would be sort of at the times when I was done working and just wanted to relax.
Mm.
So it just worked well
I
in that
think
respect.
even in terms of talking about sex, there are categories. Like Luke likes to personalize it a lot. He wants to like weave in references from his life into the
Mm.
discussion, even if you're like talking about, I don't know, Trump's tax returns or something, and then he'll try and weave in, oh, but my girlfriend back in the day was like this. And I think that would throw someone like Kevin Michael Grace off. Because I'm sure he would
Oh,
be
and it
willing to
totally did.
talk about sex in a general sense. But then if you're like
It,
just doing personal anecdotes, then the other person, maybe Kevin Michael Grace hasn't had sex.
no, he has a couple of kids.
Oh, right,
his
okay.
kids his kids are kind of losers.
Oh, that's
So
nice of you to say.
that was an interesting arc.
Is that what he
Like,
said about his kids?
it was more than what he said. He had to. He was having money troubles.
Mm,
I may be misremembering the exact thing, but he was having money trouble. So he lives in Victoria, which is the west coast of Canada.
mm.
And then I think he had a daughter in Al. Uh, what's the city called? Edmonton or Alberta?
Okay, well, somewhere
Sort of
else in Canada anyway. Yeah,
midwestern Canada, right?
right,
Uh, and so he he was going to go live with her, and he did.
right.
So he moved out to Alberta, but somehow there was a misunderstanding, and he thought she had her own apartment,
Mm,
but she was living with roommates.
mm.
So Kevin like moved into this rooming house with his daughter, and he
Mm.
was still trying to stream. So he had found this little corner of this place, and he's always looking over his shoulder. I guess people
Right.
were stealing his stuff. It was a really undignified moment for him, and he does like his dignity.
Mm,
But he would also be, according to Luke, he'd come on to the Luke show drunk.
mm. But I feel sorry for people like that.
Hmm?
I feel sorry for people like that. He's so old, and his children should be looking after him, you know?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think he's since come into an inheritance. I think his money problems are over.
Right.
Um, but
Well,
he
he's still
was.
got his PayPal up.
Yeah, oh, he does. Well,
Yeah, on in his bio, it's the KMG show will return soon on Rumble, the last Canadian you'll ever know. And then it just says PayPal. No context, just PayPal.
now I didn't follow him over. So, but that was a big when they split up. A big portion of the audience followed Kevin and abandoned Luke. And
Oh,
so a
I
lot
would
of
do the opposite.
well, right. And so there was a rift, and it became clear who was on which team after, um, after the breakup.
Does Luke call it a breakup or no?
Um, well, he doesn't use that specific word, but um, he's since tried to like invite Kevin back onto the show, you know,
Mm,
but I think the feelings are too raw. Kevin sees it as himself having been fired by Luke,
mm,
so um, Luke just thought it was stylistic differences, and he meant nothing personal about it. But um, Kevin
mm.
didn't see it that way. And so, I haven't seen Kevin show in a couple of years now. I
Okay,
just
so
haven't
in
been.
terms of hosting partners, co-hosts, Luke has had Kevin Michael Grace, Duvid. I guess would you call yourself a co-host as
No,
well,
so
or more of a guest?
no. So I'm not a co-host. I'm a frequent caller.
Mm.
Duvid Duvid used to call in much more frequently, but Kevin was only the ever proper co-host.
Okay,
Um,
so no other co-hosts then.
no. After that experience, I think Luke just resolved to go solo because he didn't. He just doesn't want to, compromise his. He wants to talk about what he wants to talk about, and he doesn't want to have to navigate other people's needs. He has a very particular editorial
Mm,
posture that he wants to maintain, and
mm.
I think just other people cramp his style. But he also needs other people to call in just to help carry the show along because I imagine it's pretty
I
exhausting.
do think it's ironic how Luke Ford has adopted this religious worldview, and although he's not like an ultra Orthodox Jew right now, he does sort of draw from Orthodox Judaism. So I find it ironic how, roughly speaking, he's sort of an Orthodox Jew, but at the same time he accepts all of these like modern psychiatric labels. The same with that person we were talking about in the previous space. Like, Why do people who claim to be sort of anti-modernity to an extent, or they draw from orthodox worldviews, they still love to accept these psychiatric labels like narcissism, borderline personality disorder? Luke Ford thinks that he has narcissism because some narcissistic personality disorder because some psychiatrist has diagnosed him with that. And every single time I speak to Luke Ford, I don't let that go. I always say, well, you don't really have NPC, Luke. You don't really have him. Because he's far too empathetic. What do you think?
Well, yeah. So his whole situation within Orthodox Judaism is weird. He's a convert. He wasn't born into it, and he had a pretty difficult childhood, and he felt like an outsider in a lot of ways, and his I think he was drawn to Judaism because he wanted to be part of like a tight knit community, and that's what Orthodox Judaism offers. And so I don't think it's a matter of belief as it's just a desire to belong to a tribe. You see
But
what I
he
mean?
does. I think he does follow it though. Like
Yeah, but you can
tries
you
really
can
hard,
be a
and I think
Jew.
he
See,
genuinely believes in God.
well, you can be a Jew and observe the rituals, but not necessarily believe them. It's sort of like a
Fine, but
it's a ritual to.
I don't think he's a Claire core. She keeps telling me that you need to behave as if you believe, and that's the best way to get your belief back in Islam. And I thought, no, I just can't. I can't do that. But I don't think Luke is in that category. I think he genuinely believes. What do you think?
I think he flickers. I think his belief is flickering. I don't think it's.
Do you think it's flickering now, or it was flickering before, or
I think
what
it
do you
always
think?
has been. I think he's right. Like, I think he has like a broad belief in the divine,
Mm,
but not necessarily the figure that's portrayed in the Old Testament. You know what I mean? Like,
mm,
I think his belief is more New Age than it is Orthodox.
mm,
So, you know, because I know
mm.
you're right. He's open to modern psychology. He's open to science. He's open to like David theoretically doesn't. I think he doesn't believe that the what is it that the Earth goes around the sun. I think he believes the sun goes around the Earth. Like there's at least he used to anyway.
But
Um,
David has more New Age beliefs than Luke, and that David is a sort of Hindu Jew.
David is just a
Because
strange character,
David,
Loren.
no, it's like you don't judge a book by its cover because Luke is the sort of Anglo clean shaven sort of guy there, and then David is the guy with the beard and the darker features, and you would assume that David is the more orthodox one, but David has a host of pagan sort of beliefs.
Well, David has had a highly strange life. I mean, he used to be a drug dealer. He used
Really?
to. Oh yeah, he had like a. I don't know if he's a drug dealer, but a cocaine addict.
Oh, okay,
And
so
he's.
there's a difference there. I mean, you need to be
But
very
I think he
street
would
smart
he would
to be
deal
drug dealer.
cocaine. He lived in New York
Mm,
among the Jewish community there, and there was you see the hats and the dark clothing and the sort of this presents this image of pious people living pious lives. David David lifted the curtain on all of that. Apparently drug use is rampant, and it's not this wholesome life that they would lead you to believe. And David got caught up in it, and then when he was done with cocaine, he had a long marijuana period, and I think that's over. But he's just an oddball that's trying
and
to make his money.
got severe ADHD because he can just go on and on and on about a particular topic. I guess a bit like me, but then Luke Ford will actually stop him and be like, "Okay, thank you, dude. Let's move on."
Yeah, he rambles. He he rambles. Yes. So,
Yeah.
but David's a very good chess player. He's like a master level chess player.
Oh, fascinating. I did
uh,
not know that about him.
yeah.
Oh, I'm very surprised
I'm
actually.
pretty good, but I'm not a master. I'm like what they call an expert, but not a master.
Do you
But I
think
think David's,
Jews in general are good at chess, as you also have Jewish lineage?
yeah, 40% of all chess champions are Jewish.
Mm,
So yes, and if you go to any sort of chess club in New York or anywhere,
mm.
it's a highly Jewish thing. Yeah,
But then,
but not
do you know what? That means Jewish people are they're basically POCs because black people are quite good at chess as well.
only the ones that have been to prison.
Yeah, yeah, but that shows that even the black guys who are not academically gifted, they're
Yeah,
quite good at chess. So it's a sort of POC game. It's people who are street smart. They know the game.
it's bohemian. It's bohemian.
Right.
Playing chess at a serious level is a bohemian activity. Most people don't have the time to put in that it requires to become very good at chess. And you need to show, if you really want to play at the highest levels, you have to show promise at a very early age, and
I'm really
then
surprised
cultivate.
by Duvid being good at chess though, because I categorized him as somebody just
Retarded.
yeah, yeah.
he, he's a
Oh,
wannabe. I don't want to bat. We Duve and I used to fight all the time on Luke streams and some of these satellite streams, but we've patched it up. In fact, you know how when I always join, I always say blessings.
yeah. I like it when you say blessings. I think it's very
But
wholesome.
but it's a joke.
I know it's
It's
a joke,
actually
but I still like
it's a
it.
it's a dig at Duvid because Duvid used to
Oh,
always Duvid used to join and always say blessings, right? And so
right.
we all started saying blessings. So it's me sort of keeping up that sort of rivalry between Duvid and myself.
Mm,
So it's a little bit of rib poking, uh,
mm.
uh, but I don't know. He's a peculiar character. What can you say?
Well, you've kind of normalized him more in my eyes, and by saying that
Normalize
he,
Duvid.
yeah, like normalized meaning you've made him seem more normal
Mm.
because he's good at chess. I literally thought he was just like, yeah, retarded, can't do anything, can't even do academic analysis properly. That's what I thought. Like he's just having trouble even being a dork.
Well, there's there's a famous episode like there's this hardcore Jew from Israel called in, right? And basically just took him to task saying that he wasn't really Jewish, he didn't know anything. And then he said, "You don't even pronounce the words correctly." He really like just tore into him. And David was really quite humiliated. I wish I could remember. I wish I could find that stream. Um, but see, he emerged. I remember the first time he emerged on Luke's show. This is a time when so in the early days of Luke's show, he would bring on all kinds of white nationalists on the show, right? And to basically debate. And then somehow Duvin had been identified. And so Luke brings on Duvin and he's got like all the optics down. All the Wignats would go crazy about it because he just looked the part so well, It said so much incoherent things that, it
Sorry,
riled them up.
so Luke brought Duvid into the chat when a bunch of wingnats were there. Is that what you're saying? Is it wignat or wingnat?
Wignat. Wignat.
Wignat. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
What does the wig stand for?
Wigger.
Right. Yeah, I've just been
So
using a really like long-winded term, like ooh, right-wing white identitarian, and then people would use the term wignat, and I would just never, it would never sort of catch on in my vocabulary, and I just sort of let it go, and I never really wondered, well, what does wig actually mean?
Yeah. So I don't think Luke would use that term
Mm,
anymore, but colloquially, that's what we would all call it. I mean, there's white nationalists who
mm,
have an education, and then there's Wignats who don't, but they basically believe the same stuff. But in their presentation, Wignats don't present pretty well. Like
mm,
Benny is arguably a Wignat, but he's a higher end of the Wignat scale. But there's
mm.
usually some Benny's psychological tics would sort of mark him out as a Wignat or Wignat adjacent.
Right.
But so
So,
so there would be like a dozen such Benny like figures on
mm,
the show, and Duvid would be amongst them
mm,
debating, and it got to be very funny.
mm. And did Duvid fare well, or did he manage to change any minds? What was it like?
No, no, he actually then a
Did he
lot of
did he
a
become a
lot of
punching
Jews.
bag?
He became a punching bag, and then a lot of Jews got angry because they felt he poorly represented the Jewish case.
Oh, that's interesting. So they didn't feel sorry for Duvid. They actually felt angry at Duvid for not
Yes,
doing a good job and sort of
yes,
getting himself into trouble almost.
yeah.
Well,
So
that's a bit sad.
Duvid's like weird because Duvid's sort of I mean, he's only half Jewish for one thing.
Mm.
Jewish. His name is David Carlton or
See,
Carl.
that
I
is
think.
another shocking thing as well. I mean, it's you're not the first one to tell me. I think Luke Ford told me in the last stream that Duvid was half Jewish. I was
Yeah.
shocked by that.
Yeah, I mean, he really wants. I mean, a lot of people that do a lot of drugs,
Mm,
right? This has been my observation. People that do a lot of drugs in their youth, meaning their
mm,
20s, um, and they eventually kick it or they eventually recognize the harm that it's doing,
mm,
and they sort of want to put their lives back together and invest their lives with some meaning.
mm,
And so they either gravitate to radical politics or religion or both. And this sort of so if you're doing drugs, you're sort of used to a very extreme state of consciousness. And so they bring that sort of thrill seeking into their politics or their religion. So Duvid, I think, fits that character. Richard Spencer fits that category.
did he do drugs, Richard Spencer? He seems pretty neat and clean now.
He used to drink heavily, and I'm sure there's been a lot of cocaine in his life.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
yeah,
I did
he's in
not
that
know that.
set.
But he used to be so productive in that back when he was a bit of a wignat, he was producing a lot of content, like writing a lot of articles for different papers and journals.
Was he
Tacky
writing
Mag.
that much, or just appearing? It's
No,
always been a knock on him that he would sort of didn't. He never really completed much. He would start a lot of things and leave them half done, and not bring things to completion and or abandon projects. Not he lost a website domain because he forgot to renew it. That was a big knock on him.
but he was sort of consistently writing for Tacky Mag. I remember,
Yeah, I don't know how consistently it was, but I knew that he
and that's
wrote.
when Ann Coulter was also writing for Tacky Mag. They both had a sort of column.
Oh, I didn't know Ann Coulter was on Tacky Man.
Yeah, and
Gavin McNevis
they wrote
was.
very sort of extensive pieces, long articles, not just like short pieces. And Spencer would not finish his work or something. He was actually seriously engaged in the topics. And it's ironic because as people as people read more and they grow, they can talk about a particular topic better. But with Richard Spencer, the opposite has happened. It's almost like he's forgotten his entire sort of, like, it's almost like that's his past life now.
Yeah, it's amazing he's able to do that because the internet, is forever. But he really kind of turned on a dime and just
Yeah, but even the way he talks about it is odd. Like
Mm.
he won't fully like he it's not even like he won't do it. It's like it's almost like he can't do it anymore. He can't tell the full story. He's losing his train of thought. He doesn't remember the different sort of um, authors, World War II authors he read. Like he can sort of quote Pat Buchanan a little bit here and there, but he won't really be able to say what exactly Pat Buchanan said vis-a-vis somebody else. Now I'm not really well read on this issue, but I know that Richard Spencer used to be because his work before Charlottesville and all that stuff is testament to that. So I don't know what
Yeah,
happened.
I agree with you. I think he had more of an intellectual edge back then in his alt right days, and uh, there's a theory out there that part of his deal, he faced a court case that sort of stemmed from Charlottesville, and
Mm,
there's a theory out there that he had to sort of, turn his back on all of that to stay out of jail, or face, more serious repercussions.
mm,
So, because it did, his about face sort of does roughly correlate to the court
mm.
case.
I
I mean, he
mean,
did lose a court case.
he did or you didn't? Sorry.
He did. He was sued, and there's theoretically it's being appealed, but
Mm.
there's considerable amount of money at stake here, at the very least. I don't know if there's any jail involved, but uh,
So is this so? Who sued him then? It was what Jewish Americans who did that.
no. Roberta
I mean,
Kaplan, yeah, I remember only the scantest details.
okay, well, I'll read up on that later. But
Mm, mm,
he's also been in a court case with his ex-wife, and he was accused of battery, and that's all been cleared now, I think, or so he says. But that's also kind of weird that somebody who looks pretty harmless has been accused of something so extreme by an ex-wife like that.
mm.
By the way, I don't believe that he did that to his wife. I don't think he did it, but also, what it does show is that he has very bad judgment. Like, why would you choose a woman like that and bring her into your life? Where is
women,
your hashtag perspicacity?
well, women have a way of changing pretty spontaneously.
I get that, but you can, I don't know, as a man, you can kind of manipulate situations with your will to power. Sometimes you can't help it. People do have issues, like they're completely different to what they, present themselves to be, or they completely turn on you later on in life. But with Richard Spencer's case, it does seem to just be a case of sort of bad judgment. Somebody has messaged me saying that it does make you wonder if Spencer was even doing the work himself. So like his pre-Charlottesville journalistic career. And I would agree with that. Like, I've been listening to Spaces with Richard Spencer, Charles Johnson is there as well, all these sort of characters who have left the right wing political scene, and that now they're kind of like broad sense liberals, or whatever they're doing. Um, and Richard Spencer does not speak in a convincing tone at all. He doesn't seem like the author of the the articles on Tacky Mag. I have to
Yeah,
admit.
I know. Even if you notice, even in my little tete-a-tete with Spencer,
Mm,
you notice how like content free his rejoinders to what I had to say were. He didn't really take on my points. He just said, "Oh, I've heard all that before, and it's just boring." That was his
mm,
disagreements with me that were just simply the matter of fact that he'd heard this stuff before and he doesn't like it. He didn't have any a specific analysis that he brought to the table.
mm,
Obviously he was rushed and so forth and on his way out, whatever. But no, I
mm.
agree with you. He doesn't seem as sharp as he used to, and so
No, but
maybe
I don't think he even was sharp. That's what I'm saying, because before he wasn't even really doing podcasts or anything. He was just writing. So we
Yeah.
didn't really have access to his spoken voice. And as soon as we had access to that, he sounded like a completely different person. I mean, I and somebody who sent me a DM is making the argument that perhaps they are two different people. Perhaps these articles have been ghostwritten.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, you're right. I guess. I didn't really ever read. I don't remember reading his stuff in Tacky Mag. I don't remember reading too much Tacky Mag to begin with, but
I did ask him about
yeah.
Taxi Mag, by the way. I think like 6 months ago or something, and it was in a recorded space, and I have it up on my um, Twitter feed as well. I'll send it to you later. So I asked him like, do you know anything about Taki Theodorakopoulos, who was the guy who ran the magazine, and he was a sort of World War II revisionist of Greek origin, and Richard Spencer just acted like he didn't even know the guy. Oh, Taki, yeah, I remember him, and I'm thinking like you wrote a column for his magazine every week.
Hmm.
And Taki Theodorakopoulos, he was also in trouble with the law. He's been accused of rape or something. Again, I don't believe this charge. It's just kind of bullshit. And this was somewhere in Vienna, I think, or somewhere in Europe. And he was imprisoned for a bit as well on this charge. And Richard Spencer, when I asked him about it, he was like, "Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe I'll go and meet him in Vienna." I'm thinking, like, shouldn't you already know that he's in prison? Like, why are you shocked? Which is odd.
Uh, it's funny. Like, one thing is, he has this book that he's cooking up with Mark Brahman,
Right,
right?
yeah.
And
Do you
it's
think he'll
been like,
finish? Because you've told
it,
me that he's notorious like for not finishing projects. Now, do you
well,
think
yeah, and like I've been hearing about this for over a year now, and for
right?
over a year, this thing was theoretically imminent. It was going to be published in the next week or two.
Hmm.
And here we are, oh, probably 15 months out, and the damn thing still isn't done. It's just peculiar to me.
Mm.
I mean, this goes to the non-finisher, and this actually goes to the drug use problem that I made. People that
Right,
are
yeah.
used to doing drugs, they like the adrenaline of starting a project, but actually grinding something to the finish line
Mm.
is too boring for them.
But I would say, I mean, I don't do any drugs, and I'd say I am also a bit of a procrastinator, so it is a sort of common problem. I just
Mm.
don't think Richard Spencer has ever started a project to begin with. That's the allegation me and a friend are making.
Wow. Well, you'll have to show up on a space. I'd love to hear that one.
Because
I've
look,
been listening.
if you can't finish projects, that's a bad trait. But it's kind of admirable because at least you started something, like that Michael
Yeah, that's
Jackson
kind of.
song. You got to be starting something. But I mean, has Richard Spencer even started anything ever?
Uh, yeah, altright.com, and I think there's a number of projects he's done, quote unquote, like some sort of online magazine. I forgot the name of it. What was it called? I don't know, but I wanted to just jump tracks to Charles Johnson.
Hmm.
What is your take on
No, no, no.
Charles
Okay,
Johnson?
we will talk about him definitely. But
Uh,
before we do that,
uh,
what is Luke Ford's position on Richard Spencer? Because I've heard Luke Ford sort of talk negatively about Richard Spencer in a kind. And you initially in this space, you said that Luke Ford likes to do a sort of psychoanalysis analysis of people. So, what is his understanding of
okay,
Richard
well, he
Spencer?
had Richard on the show once, right, way
Yeah,
back,
yeah.
and I think Luke brought up the subject of Greg Johnson, who is and was Richard's arch nemesis within the alt right. Right,
Mm,
the two of them hate each other. I mean, detest one another. And so Luke had a conversation with him, and he brought up Greg Johnson and some of the criticisms Greg Johnson had made of Richard. And Richard was furious and then blocked him on Twitter. I don't think they've ever spoken since. So, yes, and so after 2018 with Richard's, after that big audio leak of Richard, I'm so mad right now. Luke would play that on his show like dozens and dozens of times, all to point out Richard's grandiosity, right? And
well, does he even have a sense of grandiosity? I think that's also blown out of proportion. I think everyone's reading of Richard Spencer is wrong. I'm really fascinated by this current reading of Richard Spencer of a friend, that he has never written anything himself. I don't really detect major sort of delusions of grandeur either. Like when Luke Ford would sort of hint on that, I would not really sense it. And I think Luke Ford, and I think, sorry, Stephen J. James has kind of copied Colin Liddell and Luke Ford's analysis of Richard Spencer, and he keeps kind of regurgitating this, oh, Richard Spencer is really narcissistic sort of thing. And I'm just thinking, well, why? Tell me why he's narcissistic. Don't just say these things. But yeah, I mean, he says that Colin Liddell and Luke Ford are his sort of teachers. So, you know, I mean, Luke Ford ultimately has become a guru, even though he's decoding the gurus.
Yeah, that is ironic. It's true. I mean, but Luke does have a pretty broad analysis, and but to think, remember that Colin Liddell and Richard have a history as well,
Right, yeah.
and
So they sort of broke away from one another. They used to be part of the same kind of movement, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah, I think they started the initial alt-right.com together. I think with Andy Nowicki. I may be misremembering the history.
Yeah.
But they were all together at one point, and then they've all since broke apart and all mutually detest each other, which is funny. But that was always Colin's.
And Colin Liddell has moved to Japan.
Well, he's always lived in Japan as long as I've known about
Oh,
him.
right,
So,
okay. I thought you sort of just moved after this fiasco.
um, yeah, I don't know the deep history of Colin Liddell, but Colin Liddell would always criticize Richard for being basically absent. When the work needed to be done, he was just skiing or something. Richard would just take off.
That sort of makes Richard Spencer more fascinating to me. I mean, I am a curious gazelle, so I'm just curious as to who even is he.